Alright. Find your fucking reply again. I don't know why why YouTube just doesn't like, lay all the fucking replies out in one click. Anyway, okay, now where the fuck is it? Okay, I went to try this last night, but I forgot to turn my interface, things on. I had it turned on, and just, I don't know. Okay. Well, let's start here. Okay. Oh, forgot to add. If God were tyrannical and sadistic, there would be no earth, no space, no heaven, only hell. My response to that, Ken, is that we wouldn't experience anything if God didn't create life or just didn't want obedience, let alone, well, I mean, that's for heaven. Why would anybody want to be there if everything here on earth in this life is forbidden? Which you people for some reason agree with God that it's sinful and wrong and evil and all that shit. And secondly, how can heaven be this eternal bliss of an afterlife if we are only forgiven of the sin? As in, the sin is not rectified, not solved, not stopped. Wouldn't you say that heaven is only doomed to become fallen just as this world only it will be an eternal fallen world? Which means, what's the point of this fucking life? So if God were, how about not experiencing anything? Not space, no earth, no space, no hell. And if God's way is the right way, why does he need hell? I mean, you can ask certain people, they would say this life is hell. So, you don't really have anything there. Okay. Okay, that's my response to you. Okay, so you want me to have an irrational prejudice against God. Okay, how is it an irrational prejudice? Now, going back, I asked how did Adam and Eve mess that up? A question you did not answer. No, you're only blaming them because God is the creator with the reward. And, yeah. See, the way this works, Ken, I'll explain it to you. Okay, and, God created Adam and Eve and set them up to disobey him because he wants obedience. And, to fulfill his agenda, he set them up and so that they would disobey, giving him the excuse to curse us with the original sin. Which is why you believe that we're all mortal beings on this planet, vulnerable to the planet itself and each other, and other things. And God needed Jesus Christ to come, and for the sole purpose of providing you guys the way to get God's forgiveness and the pathway to heaven. That's why. So God intended for Adam and Eve to disobey. They didn't mess anything up. They were set up. How do I know this? Well, we're all all mortal and vulnerable beings on this planet, and you all know that there's nothing you can do about it. But you're not going to blame God being the creator and the provider of the reward of heaven. So that's why God needed Adam and Eve. They needed a scapegoat. He needed somebody for you to blame instead of him. Because you do want to blame somebody. So that's how that works. Well, God needs a scapegoat to fill. Yeah. Okay. So we don't want you to follow Okay, you didn't answer these questions either. Why does an omnipotent being need rules? And how are his rules sensible? Why do you want to obey his rules? Would God need rules if he either didn't want obedience or just didn't create life? You don't answer those questions. Now you say God was going to make us immortal and invulnerable until Adam and Eve messed that up, even after God told them. Now, I asked you, I think somewhere about the tree of life. Bitcoin. Point about what? Okay, I think it's up here. Okay, I didn't say anything about the tree of life. I'll say it now. I talk to a lot of people. That's why I do this. What else was this guy I said it to? Okay. Now going back to your thing here. Warn people about the shit he's... Okay, okay, what... Okay, I didn't say anything about that tree to you. I don't think. So you want me to have a... For what? To blame him for... Try to warn... Usually those who... blah 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 blah. Oh, okay, yeah. You eat from a tree, you surely... okay, you did mention it. Okay, now... I didn't say anything about the tree. Okay, I should have. But you're all over the place here. You're preaching. You're not answering my questions, and that's your fault. So, why did God create the tree? And deliberately put it within their Adam and Eve's environment? He caused the problem. And then he added insult to injury by punishing them, by banishment. That's, you know, what part of that don't you understand? You're saying that you want me to have an irrational prejudice against God. What's irrational? And what, you know? Now, prejudice, what does that mean? Preconceived opinion that is not based on, okay. So you're an irrational prejudice. Two words that are not necessary here. Okay, so irrational. We're not talking about a prejudice here. A prejudice is unreasoned. And then you add an irrational. Okay, so you want me to have an irrational prejudice against God. How is it? No, I want you to... I don't want you to have anything. I want you to just... A criticism of him. It's not irrational prejudice if God is actually guilty. Assuming his existence for the sake of saying that. And I'm always assuming his existence just so I don't have to say if God does exist after every point I make. So you want me to have no, I don't want you to have an irrational prejudice against God. I want you to have a criticism of what God's guilty of. In this case, creating a magic tree and deliberately putting it within Adam and Eve's environment, thus setting them up to disobey him, giving God the reason to curse us all with original sin. That's what I'm asking you to do. I mean, are you saying that he's not guilty of that? What did he do then? Why did God need to create that magical tree? God caused the problem by creating that magical tree of knowledge of good and evil. Could either good or evil exist if we were all immortal and invulnerable? Answer that question. For what? Why blame him if he tried to warn them of the problem that God himself caused, which he is inflicting the severe consequences of? He's the one who caused the problem, Ken. He didn't? Well, what did he do then? And why do you agree? Usually those who ignore, obey, or disobey God's warnings of his own doing? Is that what you're referring to? Who put that tree there if God didn't? Who created that tree if God didn't? Would any of this be going on if God either didn't want to be obeyed or just didn't create life? Answer those questions, Ken. Sit there, preach at me. Usually those who ignore or disobey God's warnings would be under... That's not tyranny? That's not sadism? What is that then? And why do you approve of that? Like when Samson told Delilah his secret. Who cares about Samson and Delilah? What do they have to do with anything? Are they in the Bible? Let's not forget the fact that God can see. So fucking what? Why is he giving orders? Why do you want God to give orders? Why do you want to obey God's orders? Why do you want everybody else in the world to obey God's orders? Or suffer severe consequences of the problem that God himself caused? Why does an omnipotent being have rules? There should always, always be order and accountability. This doesn't answer my question. You're just saying what should be. That's preaching. Answer the fucking question. Why does an omnipotent being need rules? Why do you want order and accountability? Why do you agree with the divine order and accountability? After all, we aren't the ones who are... Who said anything about us being omnipotent? I said invulnerable and immortal, not omnipotent. We can't do whatever we want with our free will, like how we can't break laws and free will. Now, how can we have free will? How can we be ourselves if we're all born under the devil's agency with that original sin curse? Well, the only other way is to be under God's influence, within God's agency or influence. How can free will exist if we can only be under those two influences or agencies and not our own self? Like living for our desires that are not in accordance to what God wants. Now you want what God wants, but you're only talking as a Christian. That's the Christianity in you speaking. That's the indoctrination speaking. And no matter what I say, you'll only interpret it as God talking. So, no, free will can't exist. Like how we can't break laws in a free nation You're still not answering my question. What makes God's rules sensible and powerful is if... sensible is the powerful and phenomenal amount of what wisdom? You're not answering my questions, Ken. You're preaching. Stop fucking preaching. It's not going to work on me. The more you preach is the more questions I have to ask you. And the more I'm going to bug you to answer those questions. That's how this game is fucking played, buddy. You don't like that? That's your fucking problem.